Thank you for joining us on Backstage with Randy Phillips. I am Randy Phillips. It's so meaningful that you would invest your time with us. I can't wait for you to meet my friend, Daryl Horton. Daryl is a native Austinite, community leader, and esteemed pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church. I've had the privilege of serving him on a board as we serve the community of Austin, Texas together. Daryl stands boldly for equity and justice in his personal and professional life, and I wanted his voice to speak into our hearts on the topic of racial reconciliation. Today's an important and meaningful conversation. I don't mean for it to get combative, but sometimes it feels that way, but I'm trying to learn just like you. But before we begin, would you take a moment and leave us a review on your viewing platform of choice? I'd love to hear your comments and hear from you, our listeners. Now we're ready. Let's go backstage with Daryl Horton. Thank you for joining us on Backstage with Randy Phillips. I am Randy Phillips, and I am so delighted to have on this episode Dr. Daryl Horton, a dear friend. Hello, Dr. Horton.
Good to see you, Randy. Thank you.
It's good to see you, too. My brother from another mother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Same father.
Of course.
I love you, Daryl, and I have had the privilege of serving with you in Austin, Texas.
Yes. For
a number of years. You have actually, I have served you on a board called Christ Together.
Yes.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but
okay.
You're just awesome. The only one more awesome than you is your wife, Shalonda.
Oh, my goodness. Of course. Yeah. I'm married up, and there's no doubt about it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And of all the things that are amazing about Shalonda, one of my favorite is
the fact that she loves your songs.
Yes,
she loves your
right.
music. Yeah.
She does. She has such great taste.
Oh, well, I think so. Yeah.
I've never heard you say that you liked it. I've always heard you say my wife loves your music.
Well, she wouldn't know about your music if it weren't for me. So she learned it from me, and she just her appreciation has just grown and blossomed.
I see. I see. So you're the one. All right. Before we get into some more serious matters, these are just quick hits.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you two things, and your favorite.
All right.
LeBron or Jordan?
Jordan.
Really?
Yeah.
Peanut M&M or plain?
Peanut.
Aretha or Beyonce?
Ooh, boy. I'll say Beyonce.
I'm not going to tell
I think
Aretha.
I'm flunking out here.
No, you're doing fine. Barbecue or Mexican food?
Barbecue.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
A quiet night in or a celebration out?
Quiet in.
Yeah. Instagram or Facebook?
I guess I better say Facebook since I don't have Instagram.
Dr. Horton, Facebook. Okay. Jeans or slacks?
Ooh, slacks.
Phillips, Craig, and Dean or Casting Crowns?
Phillips, Craig, and Dean.
There you go.
Yeah. Any day.
Oh, any day. The last time you and I talked, we did a podcast, I believe, in season 1, or I had you in church talking about. It was right after the George Floyd murder.
Right. Absolutely.
And the unrest, racial unrest. And, I just really needed guidance for what was happening in my city, my community, my church, my nation. And I could think of no one more qualified to help guide me than you.
Oh, well, thank you.
And really, anytime the media in Austin needs a quote from an African-American, prominent African-American clergy, it's always you.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep answering the phone, but they do seem to find. Yeah,
because you are outstanding. Do you know how many years ago the George Floyd, was that 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
I want to say it was right before COVID. So it's probably been close to 4. Yeah.
Okay. How do you think we've made progress, or we kind of just swept it under the rug, don't want to talk about it anymore? Because I've talked to one of our contemporary pastors here locally, friend of yours and mine, African-American pastor, and I said, hey, let's do a racial, like, we've done that. We're tired of talking about it. We don't want to talk about it anymore. Is that where we are? Just kind of like, let's just go to our corners and everybody.
It's tough. I think we're at a place where some of it is the fact that media changes so much. I mean, there's always something else that's happening. There's always a war. There's always a natural disaster. There's always something. And so what's the next great tragedy to talk about? So I don't know that we've necessarily made leaps and bounds from where we were with George Floyd, but I do think other things have preoccupied our attention. And for some people, I think they may still be in that same place, that what a tragedy that was for him to die and how he died. And then you go through the trial and the police officers and what happens and all those things. But I think for some people, the needle may not have moved much, but we've just moved on to something else.
I think I made a little progress. I didn't realize that I had blind spots with some of those areas. So I think I've gotten education.
Sure.
I've read books.
Yeah.
I've talked to great people like you, so I think I'm better for me, and then my kids will be better. They'll be better than me.
Right.
And hopefully my grandkids will not know this stuff at all. But how do you feel?
Well, I think that's the hope. I think it's the idea that we have to learn from each other. I think we have to not be afraid to learn, which is one of the things that I think is so great about you as a friend. I love you for that, is that you're always willing to be vulnerable and to reach out and to say, these are my blind spots. These are the things I don't know. So I want to learn so that I can be better. And I think that's where we need to be in our society, is there are things that we just don't know. And instead of sitting in ignorance, let's learn, let's research it. Let's be vulnerable to know that even as I learn this, some of it might be painful.
Yes.
Some of it might draw attention to myself on the inside. And I realize I have to grow, I have to change. But some people are just not even willing to look. And I think that's how we stay where we are.
I want to be better.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be better than me, and I want my grandkids to be better than all of us. Wasn't it Martin Luther King that said the most segregated day of the week is Sunday, because we just kind of go on our churches?
Yeah.
But I think I've asked you this before, but shouldn't it be segregated? Not segregated like I don't want you here, but the black churches have preserved history in their Sunday morning service. Isn't that a good thing?
I think there's value in that. I mean, even as we think about the city of Austin right now, our home, I think about where Mount Zion is located in historic East Austin, and everything around Mount Zion has changed and continues to change. And for some people, the Black or the African-American church is the last part of legacy and heritage that remains. And so there's a part of us that wants to make sure we hold on to our culture, our heritage, our way of worship, our way of our ideals, all those things, because it's just part of who we are. And at the same time, Randy, we're also trying to learn, how do we embrace those things without isolating other people, not allowing them to feel welcome? How can we still be open? How can we still look at what we do and say, how can we be inviting and not lose ourselves in it?
That's good.
Yeah. And so it can be a challenge, but I think it's an exciting challenge, I think.
You're living in the tension between preserving history.
Yeah.
You have the oldest African-American church. Is it in Central Texas?
It's one of the oldest in Austin. Yeah. So we're celebrating 150 years this year.
Now, were you the original pastor?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't.
Because if you are,
it's crazy.
You have a secret.
There's something in the water over there, I think. Yeah, but it is crazy though that the church is exactly 100 years older than me, which is weird to think about that. So
100 years. Yeah. So you're preserving history there, 150 years, and yet all around you is gentrified.
Absolutely.
And so is there a tension that you live in as the visionary of that church between preservation and outreach to who lives around you?
I do consider it a tension. I do think it is one because, again, the members of our church, many of them have been at Mount Zion longer than I've been, and some longer than I've been alive. But it's the idea of this is home. This is part of their history. This is part of their legacy. But we also know that any church, if it's going to thrive and survive, we have to pay attention to what God told us to do, and that is to reach out and to save the lost that are around us. Yeah. And so there are lost people around us, even if they don't look like us. Right. And so how do we make sure that there's an open invitation to hear the gospel, to worship with us, again, without compromising who we are and feeling like we can still be our full selves while still being inviting. And so that's kind of where I see that tension.
It's a tension.
Yeah.
For sure. You're now senior pastor of that church.
Yes.
You were student pastor before or youth pastor before?
Yeah, I was youth pastor
assistant
before
pastor?
And then assistant to the pastor as well, yeah.
And now you're the lead man.
Yes.
What is it like to be on that side of the desk now?
I tell people that is the largest jump is the 2 feet from that chair to the other one.
It's a large jump.
Oh, it's a long one. I can remember for years. So I've been at Mount Zion since 2002. So that's almost, I guess, 21 years or so I've been a member there.
My goodness.
And I can just remember so many years, so many Sundays watching Dr. Clark. And I would sit as close as you and I are together in the pulpit and just watch him do what he does. There was no anxiety. There was no stress for me because I'm just watching him do what he does. And then all of a sudden in 2021, there's a shift that takes place. And now I'm sitting in that seat.
Yes,
and so
you are.
Every Sunday I'm watching him watching me. And so now he has no stress and no anxiety. And so it's definitely been a wake up call. But again, it has been so exciting to discover. I love to preach before, but there's something about knowing that you get to do it every Sunday and you get to hear fresh from the Lord and get a chance to share that with the people. So I'm enjoying it. I think everything's going well. Some people may say it's the honeymoon period still because it's been 2 years, but if it lasts for 15 years, I'm good with that.
Good with that?
Yeah.
All right. So isn't it amazing how smart you are when you're on the other side of that desk?
Yes.
You have the answers to everything.
Everything.
And then when you're the man, it's like,
I don't know. Who can I call to figure out how to? Yeah, Randy's not answering today. I don't know what's. Yeah. But it's been good though. I mean, a learning experience day by day.
What's the biggest challenge as the lead pastor now?
I would probably say the biggest challenge now is just knowing that based on our culture and the setup of the church, everything in a sense comes toward you because people want resolution. People want to know, what does the pastor think? What do you? And so there's so many things that come across my desk or come to my attention that I have to be nimble enough to. Today we're talking about the color of the carpet. Tomorrow we're talking about somebody's salvation. Today we're talking about the church van. Tomorrow we're talking about, whatever it is. And so just trying to figure out how to navigate all of those things, but then also learning how to have people around you that are smarter than you in dealing with some of those things so that you can delegate those responsibilities and helping that to become a part of the culture of the church to let them know you don't have to hear it directly from me. There's other leadership in place who know how I think, who know what I'm trying to do here, and you can talk to them and they can help solve the problem. So that gives me more time to do what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you're a great man, a great pastor, and I can't wait to see how this develops for you.
Well, thank you.
Just
so
outstanding.
Kind. Yeah.
Anti-Semitism. As we're recording this podcast, there's a war between Israel and Hamas.
Yes.
The savagery of that terrorist organization, the things they did to those Israeli citizens, I just, it's so horrific. I just look away at some point, I just, how, and then in our university, some of our political figures, celebrities and so forth, the applauding of, I don't know if they're applauding the acts, but they're using the opportunity to stand up for the Palestinians, which I know that's a complicated situation.
Right.
But anti-Semitism is unprecedented, rising. As someone, as an African American who knows something about racial injustice, can you speak toward anti-Semitism? Is it similar to the path of the African American? Different?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So from my perspective, I think there are similarities, very much so. And I'll try to tell the story very briefly. So I have a dear friend who is a Jewish rabbi here in Austin, and he and I have developed a relationship over the years in which we're very close. And so he has educated me on a lot of things I did not know about Jewish history, about Jewish culture. And so one of the things we did is a few years ago before the pandemic, we literally made the decision that we were going to take a road trip together.
I remember that.
And we drove across the United States together in a rental car for 5 days. And what opened my eyes about that is that the first stop we made was in Houston at the Holocaust Museum. Oh. And I had never been before. And so when I went to the Holocaust Museum, Randy, it was gripping, it was frightening, it was just eye-opening to look at what happened to the Jewish people during the time of the Holocaust. And what was so frightening about it is that it was the same propaganda. It was the same deal that we would attribute to what happened with slavery. Yeah. The same type of practices. You take a people, you demean them, you make them of less value so that other people aren't concerned about their demise, and you just run that until it becomes common. And so I would say that what we're watching right now, my heart still leans in that direction to see people being slaughtered and see the tragedy that's taking place. And so I rely on my friend to try to help me interpret those things. And he told me something just the other day that just jarred me over the phone. I asked him how he was doing, and he said, "My heart is hurting, my heart is breaking, because this has been the greatest tragedy since the Holocaust." Oh, my. And again, when you think about what kind of tragedy that was, for him to use that as the analogy was just riveting to me, that I would have never thought about that if I hadn't spoken to him about just how tragic that is about what's happening over there. Yeah.
My goodness. I do remember reading in media about your road trip with the rabbi. I just thought that was so cool. So you would say anti-Semitism and the racial hatred and injustice, those are parallel tracks, or?
Yeah, no, I think they are, because again, it's hatred because of a person, just because of who they are, where they come from, because of the color of their skin, or because of where they originate. Okay. And the hatred doesn't get much deeper than that. All
right, let me widen it just a bit. And you tell me, is this another parallel track? Okay. Or not a parallel track? So you got anti-Semitism, you've got racial injustice for the African American and others, LBGTQ plus I don't what so is they many times want to say it's the same issue. Is it the same issue?
For many of us as African Americans, I think, I'll only speak for me. I think for most of us, the answer would be no, it's not the same. Even though there can be a fine line between it, but I think we see the idea of what's happened to African Americans in the past, and even what happens to Jewish people, is that people have been taken from their native lands. Everything has been robbed and stripped from them, and they have been mistreated and used as slaves and used in a way that can never be compensated for what has been done to them. When we get to the idea of the LGBTQ, IA, and all of those type of cultures, it comes to the place where the hatred is wrong. We shouldn't hate them because of the lifestyle they choose. I think all of us can agree with that. But I think there's some who would say that it may be too much of a leap to put that into the same lump sum of what's happening to an entire group of people because of their race, because of the color of their skin, things that we are not able to choose, things that we did not have a choice in. And I understand that even as I say that, some people will get upset and say that to live that lifestyle is not a choice. Right. And that's a whole nother discussion and other things that you talk about. But that's why I think there has to be that sense of separation, because again, for African-American people, they were taken from their homeland. They were put on slave ships, 400 years of, you go on and go on. And it's just not apples to apples when you think about that.
But I think it's it has been a way for that community to say, this is the same issue. Right. I did not choose to be this way. I was born this way, as the song says. And your injustice toward me or hatred or whatever is the same as if you were doing that toward a black person or a Jewish person. I've tried to reconcile that in my head, but hearing from you.
And again, of course, I can't speak for everybody, but I know that there would be a lot of people that I would talk to from the African American side that would say it has been done. It has been attempted to try to draw the two together and to do legislation and to do all those things to bring those two together. But there's a distinction. There is a difference. And again, I'll say overly and above, hatred of anybody is wrong. And I think we're all against hating them because of whatever reason.
Of course.
But we do think that the two things are separate. They're not exactly the same. Yeah.
Critical race theory. Let's just jump off.
Yeah. Let's get into it. Let's solve it all today.
Let's solve it all. First of all, you have your doctorate.
Yeah, that's
You're
what they
smart,
tell
man.
me. Well, I don't know about that, but
when I shake your hand, I feel smarter.
Okay.
Where'd you get your doctorate from?
From Bright Divinity at Texas Christian University.
Man, that's so hard to do.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Fun?
It was 5 years of yeah.
I got my master's.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, we celebrated and shouted for you.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. But I thought, well, what about the doctorate? And like,
No. Just keep going. Go ahead. You don't have anything else to do. Go ahead. Yeah. You're just pastoring a church and just, you got plenty of time.
So you're a smart man. So much smarter than me. I can't figure out critical race theory on the surface. Like, what is wrong with teaching in the universities and schools that this was done by us? And it's not, can you help enlighten me on what is critical race theory? Why does this make people so agitated and draw sides and all that?
Sure. So from my understanding of what it is and what causes people so much anxiety is that critical race theory is the idea of us teaching about things that have happened in this country, especially when it comes to the government and dealing with slavery and racism and systemic issues. Some people are afraid of it and don't want it to be taught because people believe that if we teach the truth about what happens, it negates or it diminishes the dominant culture that did those things. And so the problem is that as an Anglo person, I may not want you teaching that because you're teaching my children that they're less than or that they're evil or that they're racist children. And that's not really what critical race theory is about. What it's about in its purest form is the idea there are things that happened in this country that we cannot turn a blind eye to. There are things that happened. The massacre in Tulsa, it happened.
Horrible.
There's documentation. There are pictures. It happened.
Horrible.
And so as a result of that, how was that community set back? As a result of that, what happened to the families? What happened to? And so I think critical race theory in its purest form is trying to say, let's talk about the history. Let's talk about the facts of what happened, because if we don't talk about the history, you don't understand how we get to where we are today.
Yeah.
And so again, I think some people are afraid of it because they take it even further to say that if these ideals are true, and if I have an ancestor, if I have a family that participated in that, you're making me just as guilty as the ones who did it, or you're making me less of a person because I'm connected to those who did it. And I don't think that's the intent. The intent is to just have the history in front of us so that we can understand how we came to be where we are.
And so we don't repeat it.
So we don't repeat it. Yeah.
But has it been hijacked, though, by an element of the progressive or, I don't know, activists that want to take critical race theory and say, this is what happened. And as a result, you as a white person are, there's evil in you. There's evil in your grandparents.
Yeah.
Did it get hijacked a little bit? And
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's why you have the overreaction of states and other people saying, we're going to take all these books off the shelves because we don't want you teaching our young children that they're evil or that they are whatever the case might be. And so I think it has been hijacked because we know that fear motivates people. Fear moves people. And that's what I think is behind it, is that if we can create enough fear, then people will be with us to ban these books and to do these other things because I'm afraid of what will happen if my children read it.
So critical race theory in its purest form, you feel like is a good thing, so that we all know in this country there's been injustice, it's hatred, evil. We're not going to let that happen anymore.
Absolutely. I think
we're
that's
moving
what it is,
forward.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not to cast a whole race that you're perpetuators of evil. It's like, this is what happened,
right,
and this is how we're going to get better.
Absolutely. That's what I think it is, and that's how I understand it. Because, Randy, I even think about our city, and I think we talked about this before. I think about the fact that a part of Austin's history is the 1928 city plan, and that was the plan back then, where every person of color had to move to what we know is now east of I-35.
Isn't that amazing?
And so if people don't know that history, people walk around wondering, why are all the black churches east of I-35? Why are most of the black businesses? Why are the black communities? And if you don't go back and look at the history of why it happened, then we don't understand why things are the way we are 100 years later. And it's not so much, in my opinion, to go back and to place blame or to continue to do that, but we are to look at it and say, these are the policies that were put in place that caused the issues we have. So now, as a collective people, how do we go back and fix those policies? How do we go back and address those things that may still be systemically in place, so that people are not still being put out, people are not still being harmed by decisions that were made 100 years ago? But if we don't study and know about them, then there's no way for us to correct them and fix them. Okay.
Thank you for helping me with that.
Yeah.
What about the people that say, hey, we voted in an African-American president. We've arrived. All races are equal. We're good to go. I mean,
all good.
The highest office, the most powerful man in the world is an African-American. What is flawed about that statement?
I think what's flawed about it is that it was a great accomplishment to have President Obama in office. But the one thing we have to understand is that his election to the office did not fix things. It did not fix the systemic issues that are in place. It did not go to every state in the nation and fix the local issues, the state issues. It didn't turn around the situations in which people live in, where you have some of the poorest zip codes in certain states, and they're predominantly African-American people, and there are systemic things that continue that process. His election did not change those things. And of course, we all know that just like having an Anglo or a white president, he doesn't represent every white person in the country. Neither does Barack Obama represent every black person in the country either. And so even some of his ideals may not have matched everything that African-American people thought he should do.
What would you tell, you've lived 50-ish years.
Yeah.
You look good.
Yeah, I'm trying.
What would you tell your younger self?
Wow. I would definitely tell my younger self that things do get better.
They do. Yes.
That if you keep striving, if you continue to try and don't give up, that God does have a plan for you, that there are moments where things look bleak. There are moments where you think you can't achieve or do what you can, but just keep working and just keep trying and keep trusting God, and that things do get better.
They do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so you won't, as a younger man, you would know it gets better. I don't need to give up.
Yeah.
And I don't need to use a permanent solution for a temporary problem.
Absolutely.
Things change.
Yeah. Like you and I have talked before, it's a season, right? There's certain seasons that we have. And I mean, Randy, I can remember, and I won't tell the whole story, but I try to tell the young people at our church that I flunked out of college when I first started. I was there for 2 years, and my GPA was so low that they said, hey, you got to go home. You can't stay here anymore. And that was a low point for me, because I was like, wow, what do I do? I flunked out of college. How do I survive this? But it was a season. It was a moment of maturity for me. It was a moment of learning how to do things. And so I tell people and testify the fact that the same school I flunked out of as an undergraduate is the same school where I received my doctoral degree. Who would have known 20 years later that it would come full circle like that, you know? And so that's what I would try to tell the younger me is, don't, first of all, quit doing the dumb stuff you're doing, but just know that time can get better. Yeah.
What would you tell young men who are going to go into ministry?
Yeah.
What advice would, a seasoned Dr. Daryl Horton say to them?
Wow. I would definitely say that ministry is not for the faint of heart. I would say that ministry is going to be a sacrifice, I guess you could say almost every day of your life, and that you grow and mature in ministry. You don't have to know everything on the first day. Thankfully, because of God's grace, number one. But secondly, because God will put people around you if you're open to it,
right?
Who will walk with you, who will help you. And God wouldn't call you if he would not equip you for what he wants you to do. And so I would say, number one, make sure that is the calling that you have, because some people do it for different ulterior motives, but make sure it's the calling, and then trust that God will mature you and grow you in ministry, and always be willing to learn. Yeah.
That's good. Good word. What's the biggest challenge facing the church today? In America first, and then we'll go globally.
I really think in America, the church is facing the idea of being relevant. I think we're living at a time now where technology and people have, there are so many things that you can do to try to appease yourself and to try to grow and to try to enlighten yourself, that people are asking, do I really need the church? Do I really need this universal God that supposedly exists in my life, when I have technology and I have education and I have money and I have all of these things that can meet my needs? Is the church really relevant for me?
My goodness, that is a challenge.
Yeah.
And what would you say globally the greatest challenge is for the global church?
I think for the global church, the challenge is going to be what we've probably faced in this country for a long time when it comes to religion, and that is, how do we find a way to come together if we truly serve the same God, understanding we may have different traditions or different forms of worship or whatever the case might be, but how do we make sure that what we're doing across the planet doesn't cause those who don't know God to think there's a sense of hypocrisy or a sense of disunity, that we can't even get together and we claim to serve the same God. So I think that's going to always be the challenge, is how do we come together and help people to understand that we can love each other and serve God together, even if we don't look the same and do it the same way.
That's good. And how long have you been married to Shalonda?
This year is 27.
My goodness.
Yes. Yeah. We were in middle school. We got married.
Yeah, you were. I guess you could do that back then.
Yeah.
I have almost been married 40 years.
Wonderful. Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah.
Also married in middle school.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it.
Marriage advice. What's one of the best things you learned as a young husband, now a veteran of marriage?
Other than listen to her and do what she tells you?
Do what
other
she
than
says.
that. No, I would definitely say that with marriage, what I'm learning, Randy, is that we are growing and we're changing together. And so we were married for her straight out of college. She graduated. Of course, I briefly told that story. I had not yet. And so we were young, we were ambitious, we were trying to do things. We didn't have any money. We were living in apartments. I mean, you're doing all that stuff and you're learning how to do that together. And then as we grow more together and we learn more about each other, we learn more about life. We begin to get careers. We begin to be stable. We begin to do, I think what's been exciting to me is how we learn and watch each other mature together, and we see our needs change and we begin to see how we grow. When we first got married, we knew there were things I was good at, there were things she was good at, and we left each other. That's what you do, that's what I do, because we're good at them.
Yeah.
And over these years, some of those things have either grown together where we've become good at both of them, or we've learned other things where we said, I thought I was good at that, but really you are, you know? And so we're learning to do those things to be able to manage stuff together. And we're learning to value time together even more.
Yes.
Because it doesn't take much, as we've talked about in these seasons of life. We begin to see people we love that God decides to take home to be with him. And it begins to get personal when you start to look at that. And you're like, wow, I really do love her. And I want to spend as much time as I can with her, because we don't know what tomorrow brings, right?
You don't know.
And so you start shifting your priorities about what we do, that work is not as important and obligations are not as important, that if she wants to do X, Y, Z, then that's what we're going to do, because I want her to be happy. And so I think that's what we're learning as we go about that. But my advice would be is to love your wife to the best of your ability. And one of the jokes that we try to tell in our marriage ministry is that you ought to be a constant student of your spouse, and you ought to be trying to get a PhD in your spouse. And you ought to know her well enough that you don't have to ask her things, you just know.
You know.
And so you do things preemptively.
That's great.
If I'm picking up food when I go home, I shouldn't have to ask her. I should know by now,
I know
either this, or this. And when I get home, there shouldn't be a surprise, right?
That's right.
That kind of stuff.
That's good. Good words.
Yeah.
Biological children. You did.
We do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable speaking to the challenges of infertility, what you and your wife have gone through?
Yeah.
Where your heart is at this point?
Absolutely. So the quick version of the story is Shalonda and I, we in our, I guess we were probably about 8 to 10 years in, and we finally got to the place where we were like, do we want to have kids or do we not? And so we started thinking about that. And it's amazing how God prepares you for things that you don't even know he's doing it. And so we were at Mount Zion, hadn't been there very long. And the story is we go to summer camp with the kids, and come to find out God allowed us to do an obstacle course at the summer camp. The obstacle course is about 25 feet off the ground, and all we have is each other to not fall off of the obstacle course. And we're walking on tight ropes, on ladders. Little did we know that as soon as we get back from the camp, Shalonda would have some complications, and come to find out that she would have to have a hysterectomy so that we could not have children. And we believe that during that camp, God was showing us that you're going to have to hold on to each other tighter than you've ever known.
Love that.
And that's what we did 25 feet off the ground, is we held on to each other through everything we navigated. So once we got through that moment and we realized that what was going on, a couple of years went by, and we finally tried to determine, do we want to have children in our life? And so we prayed about it. And one of our dear pastor friends in the city would ask me every year he saw me, are y'all going to do adoption or not? And I would say, we're praying about it. He goes, how much praying does it take? It's been like 8 years. What are you trying to?
Prayed enough.
Yeah. And so I can tell you that in the pandemic was 20 through, so probably about 2022, we finally became certified foster and adoptive parents.
That's great.
And then we actually had our first placement toward in April of 2022, I think it was. And so we had that placement for about 9 months, and we learned a lot in caring for the children, and they gripped our hearts, and we fell in love with them. And then God would also show us, foster care and adoption is a challenging thing to do. And every placement is not to be permanent. Right. And so we believe that God showed us that we were there to play a role in their life, and then hand them off to the next family where they could love them even more in another fashion. So yeah, that's where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have sons and daughters all over this city. You've mentored. You've been a dad too. Shalonda's been a mother too. Sure. Just because you don't have biological children doesn't mean you're not fathering and mothering.
And that's been a blessing as well. And so we've had some people that were confused about that because they know we don't have kids. And some young people will come up to us and say, that's my dad, or that's my grandfather. And people are scratching their head going, how is that even possible? How is that, And so we love it when people hear that and they're confused. Yeah. It starts rumors around the church. That
it does.
Yeah.
Well, I sure love you, Daryl Horton.
Yes, sir. Love you too,
honor,
Randy. Yeah.
Just to serve in this city with you, to know you. You're a class act. You're a righteous man.
Well, bless you.
And,
thank you.
I love you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being on my podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Love you too, my friend. Thank you.
Well, I love you, Daryl Horton. Thank you, Shalonda, and your wonderful church for being a beacon of light in my life and the light of our listeners today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To follow more of Daryl Horton's ministry, you can find his church at mountzion-baptist.org. Thank you for tuning in. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show and help us spread the word. I'll see you on the next episode.